I have a history with Paper Mario. A bittersweet tale not too far removed from every other fan under the sun. So much so that I don't even really think I need to say what you know I'm about to say. Those first 3 games were damn cool. Remarkably simple RPGs that forsook the tedious grinding and obnoxious random encounters of their contemporaries. Paper Mario was this brilliant fusion between turn-based battles and Mario platforming. Well, 2 of them were, I guess. In the overworld, you jump around and explore for secrets, solve puzzles, the works. In battle, you'd be in for a turn-based system with the added interactive effect of timing your attacks and guards. All of this wrapped in a deliciously clever package lined with a cast of memorable characters, stunning vistas, and engaging, momentarily heartwarming stories. Paper Mario was so clever, so intriguing, so unique. And then, November 11th, 2012, Judgment Day. One of my favorite series was ruined forever. Alright, so I recognize this isn't some brave or controversial opinion. Nevertheless, Sticker Star was a pretty awful video game. Certainly one of Nintendo's most bland outings on the 3DS, a game whose existence continues to utterly baffle me. Super Paper Mario was a large departure for sure, but it was still at least vaguely reminiscent of its predecessors. Clever dialogue, memorable characters, amazing music, locations. It had most of what made the previous games great. It was simply more of a platformer than an RPG. I was really looking forward to this game. I didn't care whether or not it was turn-based. I didn't care whether it had EXP, whether it had partners, whatever. It could have carved whatever path it wanted. I had a problem with the path it decided to take. Instead of a wacky, memorable spin on Mario's universe of characters, I got a Bowser who doesn't speak. Bowser. One of the best written characters in all of the Mario RPGs. It became just another cog in the mainline Mario machine. Only regular Toads and Goombas were allowed to fill our screens. We apparently lost a Chain Chomp party member because it would be too similar to Thousand Year Door. We got a level-based format because that's just what Mario is, I guess. Every franchise eventually defaults to the glory days were good and nostalgic and we should cram this shit in everything. I burned out on this game brighter than Icarus himself, my memories of it all burning alongside my optimistic expectations. It's no surprise that upon seeing trailers for Color Splash, taking note of the many, many similarities to Sticker Star, seeing that Bowser was once again relegated to final boss status, seeing the damn Koopalings again, seeing bog-standard Mario characters with absolutely no flavor or personality, seeing another level-based structure for seemingly no reason, no thanks. I didn't play it. Lots of my friends and mutuals were talking about how good the visuals were and how clever the writing was, but it just wasn't enough. It still didn't seem like it had an identity of its own. It was falling back on tired Mario tropes, the same unfortunate nail in the coffin that plagued Paper Jam. By the way, oh my lord, do you want to talk about disappointment? We finally get a crossover between Mario and Luigi and Paper Mario, and it only had Goombas and Boos and oh, why was this concept so wasted? What about the X-Nauts, Tubba Blubba, Rock Hawk, Prince Peasley, Fawful, Count Bleck? Why are none of these characters in your RPG crossover? Why is it just Mario enemies in standard grassy plains and deserts? This will never not bother me. Why was this concept wasted? There was a lot of confusion. By the time Origami King was announced, I had grown ambivalent. I'd accepted that Paper Mario was dead to me and was oddly okay with it. I mean, it had a great run. 3 of my favorite games ever. Not too shabby. I'm an adult now. I have long since stopped freaking out over video games like I did when I was younger. If Paper Mario is gonna do its own weird thing now, honestly, more power to them. They don't owe us anything, so I was happy to skip it and whittle away at other games on my expansive backlog. Clearly it was making other people happy. Why rain on their parade? I'd always have my fond memories of those early entries, and I could return to them whenever I wanted. Provided I find my own way of playing those earlier games. Nintendo certainly isn't eager to preserve their games for modern hardware. Had to resuscitate my Wii U for several minutes just to install the hack that lets me play Thousand Year Door without paying some rando $200 on eBay. So that was the plan. Revisit Thousand Year Door since it had been a long time, skip Origami King, and let people have their fun with it. Far be it from me to be the buzzkill. Everything was just fine. And yet, I couldn't shake this feeling that something was different this time. There was a bit of a light horror vibe to the trailers. Everyone in the kingdom was being folded into origami by a villain that isn't Bowser. Wide open levels, puzzle combat system. Everyone I knew and respected were raving about this one. I bit the bullet. Why not? My expectations weren't high to begin with, so how could this game let me down? Might as well give it a shot. Who knows? Maybe it could light the fire that's been dormant for so many years. Paper Mario: The Origami King fucking rules. Wow, it feels good to say that. I'm not gonna pretend it's some masterpiece, but it just... Guys, Paper Mario finally feels like it was allowed to be its own thing, to break away from the Mario universe and try something new. Like, yeah, there are obviously still a lot of limitations here. There are a ton of generic-looking toads scattered throughout the game. I will never understand why Nintendo are so obsessed with these milquetoast creatures, though I think the ways in which it leans into its Mario heritage are far more tasteful on the whole. First of all, while the folded soldiers may just be generic Mario enemies, they have super unique origami designs that lean into the whole B-movie horror vibe it's going for. When you see them just walking around, staring off into space, something feels off. Some of them are even deep cuts to the Mario Bros. Arcade game. Seeing a sidestepper again brought me right back to my childhood, playing Mario Bros. On my Super Mario Advance cartridge. You get folded ninjas, charging chucks, you even get bone Goombas. I suppose if they're going to limit themselves to only pre-established Mario mythos for whatever reason, it's cool that they're at least willing to use more than just a barrage of Goombas and Koopas. It also allows Bowser's minions to serve as NPCs again, thank God. You actually get to hear what their life is like rather than immediately gunning for their heads. It bolsters the looming origami threat when it's clear that everyone in this world is fighting against its influence. My favorite lines of dialogue were usually in these cafes where minions go to take a break. Dig the calm atmosphere of these, it really humanizes the minions in a way not too dissimilar to 64 or Thousand Year Door. There's a strangeness to this world that's difficult to escape no matter where you go. You're up against a horde of origami soldiers led by their king and his legion of stationery. Colored pencils, hole puncher, scissors, all of them boss fights. It would have been so easy to stop there, to make them random bosses based on objects from our real world. In Sticker Star, they were completely random special attacks. I guess that was the extent of the gag? Origami King doesn't stop at simply introducing household items, it goes a step further with it. Its legion of stationery fit with the origami theming quite well. Hole Punch is a disco king, huge music buff. Tape is a mafioso donning his tape pompadour after cracking his casing. Colored Pencils is a pretentious artist. Their lifelike designs brilliantly juxtapose the more fantastical paper world they find themselves in. Watching them bobble around like they're action figures being played with by a human being is just It's so off-kilter that I can't help but love it. Each of them guard one of the 5 streamers, and the areas leading up to them have a sly bit of foreshadowing. For some reason, there's a hole where the sun used to be in the desert, and toads with holes for faces stuck in a pyramid. Who's the boss of this streamer? Hole Punch. Toads taped to the side of a tower? Tape. Gorgeous graffiti on the walls of a lighthouse? Colored pencils. Hell, Scissors takes it to the next level, flying out of Bowser's castle and eviscerating Bowser Jr., proudly announcing his presence like the wannabe anime villain he is. Even once you're inside Bowser's castle, you get to see enemies of his own creation. Incredibly creepy paper human cutouts and origami fold-out families, a pile of cut-up bodies waiting outside Scissors' domain, which he then glues together to make a giant Frankenstein's papercraft monster. Did I mention, by the way, that Scissors is characterized as the anime villain who wants to have a fair fight with you, and so deliberately dons a casing to put himself on a more level playing field? He warns that if you break his casing, he won't hesitate to hold back his full power. Also, this is Scissors' battle theme.
You have chosen death.
Can't get over how genius this is. It's hard to describe how impressive Origami King is in a visual sense. Every morsel of space is taken up by craft paper and cardboard, all folded or cut up into what resembles a living, breathing diorama. I've seen a lot of arguments that this focus on paper as an aesthetic was never the point of the originals, but I'd argue this is simply the logical next step of those originals. Those original games were based on pop-up storybooks, and as much as people vehemently deny that the paper influence was anything more than a background element, I'd argue that the paper aesthetic was always one of its biggest draws. Why do you think the first few games framed their battles through the lens of a stage play famous for man-made props? That isn't simply a flavor, that's as much a part of those games' personality and storytelling as the Mario characters. Origami King, then, is a jaw-dropping evolution of that philosophy. It's inescapable. Water looks like craft paper, structures resemble folded cardboard. It's like the entire world was folded up, cut out, and glued together onto a display. An incredibly detailed work of art. I can't even begin to imagine how much work went into the visual design here. I mean, come on. King Ali's castle has origami fortune tellers to act as stand-ins for piranha plants when you fall. If that isn't an absolute dedication to an idea, I don't know what is. I can't even begin to describe how big the grin on my face was when I arrived in a new area. You're thrown into these creatively labyrinthine locations. Shogun Studios is a real highlight. Feudal Japanese theme park? Sign me the hell up. I bought myself a lifelong pass instantly. Couldn't help but be right there with Olivia on this one. For as much as this game can force you into some groan-worthy unskippable tutorials early on and hold your hand a bit, once the ball gets rolling, progression isn't always a simple matter. In Shogun Studios, your main objective is to get a key to the central building which houses the blue streamer. Olivia and Bobby surmise that it must be in this building that someone saw Luigi enter earlier. There's a chain chomp guarding the building who will not move until she gets something. The game doesn't really tell you. Thus starts your exploration of Shogun Studios. Every hallway, building, roof, secret passageway, you have to explore it all to find progression items. Not only that, you often have to travel back to areas of interest with new key items, so you can start a Zelda trade quest until you finally happen across the bone you need. Taking a straw from a very strange Shy Guy and giving it to a Ninja so he can use it as a reed pipe and breathe underwater. It's reminiscent of a point-and-click adventure, though not nearly as obtuse or complicated. Still, it's enough to get you combing through the whole area, stumbling across a wealth of secret toads and treasures along the way. You get to take similar non-linear approaches in the Scorching Sandpaper Desert, Great Sea, and Shangri Spa. The Great Sea in particular serving as a cute homage to the Wind Waker, right down to keeping track of islands and treasures on your sea chart, and having Mario undergo the trials of power, wisdom, and courage to obtain their 3 spheres. On second thought, they may have lifted this part wholesale. Much as I love these more open areas, even the more straightforward areas are fun to explore because they take a Zelda dungeon-esque approach to their design. They aren't nearly as complicated as the best that Zelda has to offer, but I don't believe they really needed to be. Instead, there's a focus on finding secret passageways for key items, partaking in some light platforming challenges, and solving puzzles room by room. Vellumental temples are perhaps the best showcase of this. Ice block pushing puzzles, a bunch of enemies to fight, a bunch of secrets to uncover. There is seriously no shortage of creative hidden toads in this game. It is crazy just how many of them there are. You can find these bastards basically everywhere, and they're always a joy to find. Their devious hiding spots beg you to interact with every crease and fold of the overworld design. These hidden toads, in concert with the hidden blocks, treasures, and confetti holes, make the somewhat simple dungeons a lot more fun to explore. There's always something more around every corner, some micro-puzzle to solve, or a wall to break down, or a hidden block to bash. It is consistently satisfying. Each of these wonderful areas are interconnected, and going from one area to the next makes complete sense. Gone is the tacky level select structure. Now we have fast travel points across an entire world. A world, by the way, which has its own lore to uncover. Wild as that might sound. Might seem like all these areas are just thrown together willy-nilly, but no. By the time you reach Shangri Spa, a number of connections are made. Mysteries built up about the legendary Captain Toad frozen underneath the scorching sandpaper desert, the late King Shroomses, the 4 Vellumentals, the sunken Diamond Island housing the 3 trials, the Super Marino submarine. It all comes together. Shangri Spa is this spa resort floating above the clouds, a place only those who have passed the 3 trials can enter. The ancient Super Marino was created so that people could access the underwater trials, but it was stolen by Captain Toad so he could explore the treasures hidden deep on the ocean's floor. When he tried to trade his riches with King Shroomses, the king denied him as he was loyal to Shangri Spa, and it prompted Captain Toad to freeze himself underground so he could avoid the wrath of the king. It would seem that the 4 Vellumentals also play a part in this history, as they're prominent figures within the sea tower that grants access to Shangri Spa. Each of the Vellumentals have their own temples, some of which are still actively worshipped. It's cute that the Koopa Troopas worship the Earth Vellumental as their god, itself a giant turtle. And of course, this shady toad has turned this sacred site into a tourist trap where you can make a generous donation to hear totally not made up tidbits about the temple, like how this definitely not random rock is indestructible and holy, or how this totally not random ridge has been left in its historically accurate uneven state. I recognize this isn't some Westeros level world building, but for a Mario game, it's kinda impressive to me that all of these unique area concepts and upgrades are threaded together not only in their mechanical progression, but also through their place in the text. It's a small gesture, but it's yet another reason each area sticks out in my mind. You don't go to these areas and spit them out. Sniffit City transforms into Shroom City during the day, allowing you to go back and see what's changed about the town. What happened to all the Sniffits that basically took the place over during the Perpetual Dusk? Some of the toads you rescue will return to Toad Town, which adds more and more detail to the Toad Town hub and gradually amps up the Toad Town theme. Shogun Studios is a bit of a ghost town on account of it being taken over by folded soldiers and a giant collection of rubber bands. When you return to it, you get to see it in its full glory. If this was a traditional level select, this simply could not have happened. No returning to previous areas with new abilities, no change in NPC dialogue, no new accessories and items in the shops, nothing. Blasphemous as it might sound to many, this reminds me most of the early Paper Mario games, where you could return to different areas throughout the adventure for new dialogue. You were allowed to catch up on what was happening in the world you were exploring. Origami King, in its own small way, revives that sentiment. But to say this game is great because it takes after 64 and Thousand Year Door would be, in part, disingenuous. Although it may harbor a similar spirit, much of what makes it great is completely unique, and not just in how expansive its hub levels are. Playing for more than a couple minutes, you'll quickly notice the battle system is simply unlike anything else. Gone are the days of partners, experience points, and badges. This is puzzle combat. Enemies dot various squares on a giant circle, and it's your job to line them all up in a limited number of turns and slides as if you're solving a Rubik's Cube, under the gun of a timer no less. I'll be the first to say that Origami King is not an outwardly difficult game. Most of my game overs were from cheeky dialogue choices rather than straight up deaths. It's in the puzzle aspects of combat where the system shines. There are many patterns to work with, and while some are fairly simple, some had me scratching my head for minutes on end, slowly funneling my coins to buy myself more time, the tension draining my mental capacity in real time. While it's totally possible to just solve each puzzle incorrectly and deal with the enemies, that was never a satisfying solution. If you don't solve the puzzle correctly, you don't get the increase in damage, nor do you get to finish the battle more quickly, nor do you get a flood of extra coins for a job well done. You get out of the system about as much as you put into it. Paradoxically, I'd find myself wasting more and more coins on that timer, losing more coins than I could ever gain even if I did eventually solve the puzzle, just because I knew I could solve it if I didn't give up. My satisfaction upon solving a particularly difficult puzzle was always immeasurable, taken to the next logical extreme in the boss fights. Creating a path for Mario to follow sounds simple enough, but when you litter that path with obstacles, special attacks, hearts, chests, coins, and all manner of other distractions, optimizing your route becomes all the more challenging. You can attack each of these bosses with a regular attack square just fine, but most of the time you'll run into a problem. Be that a specific attack not working, the boss throwing out a super powerful attack, or a variety of specialty squares that only work when specific conditions have been met. Often these fights aren't just about making a path to the boss, they're figuring out how the boss operates and what their weaknesses are. In your fight against the Water Vellumental, you get to use the Earth Vellumental ability for the first time. It's not exactly clear about where and when you're supposed to use it, since it's available during every turn of battle provided you've run over the on switch. What the game leaves for the player to figure out on their own is that this Earth Vellumental attack isn't just an attack. Sure, it will do damage to the Water Vellumental when it's on the ground, but otherwise it doesn't do much of anything. Peculiarly though, it leaves Mario in an elevated state. Eventually you'll encounter the boss's Tidal Wave attack, dealing frankly insane damage to Mario even when successfully guarded against. When do you use the Earth Vellumental attack, and how do you defend against the Tidal Wave attack? Coming to the correct answer involves approaching the Earth Vellumental's defensive capabilities rather than its offensive capabilities. Using it during the Tidal Wave will lift Mario above the crest of the wave. Attack misses, Water Vellumental falls to the ground, and you can go to town with your thousandfold arms. If you can position your thousandfold arms on the direct square where the tail is, you get an extra attack where you slam it down by the tail. Neat touch. Every boss operates on this philosophy. Colored pencils will target parts of the battlefield so Mario can't pass over them. The thousandfold arms technique can close the lid, but only for the first half of the fight. In the second half, trying to close the lid will end in a wasted turn. Instead, you have to grab the swirling barrage of pencils and slam them into the container. Not only will Hole Punch leave holes in the floor, he will punch holes in Mario that decrease his max HP, and he'll have to reclaim his lost parts scattered across the ring, dramatically changing how convoluted your path needs to be. Tape will lock rings together, forcing multiple rings to be changed at once, or preventing the ability to slide panels altogether. In order to even defeat Tape, you first have to deal with his dispenser by damaging all 4 of his corners in equal amount. Once he's exposed, you can frantically pull out his tape with the thousandfold arms. None of these unique quirks take away from the fact that you can make an incredibly simple path for a regular attack and blitz the fight that way. But that just isn't satisfying, is it? Not when you can examine the arena more thoroughly, realize there's a longer, more convoluted path filled with extra hearts, coins, and even attack power-ups that'll make your attack far more devastating than if you had just taken the coward's way out. These micro decisions complement the puzzle combat well. Just as some enemies can't be jumped on and some can't be hit with your hammer, some enemies, like Koopa Troopas, can be knocked into enemies behind them if placed in front of a row. Boos will disappear when you start twisting them, meaning you'll have to very quickly count how many spaces you have to move them, and then remember where they are for future rungs of the puzzle. Snow spikes hold snowballs above their heads, protecting them from jump attacks. Those weird paper humans crafted by scissors were wild when I first encountered them. If you twist the circle, they clone themselves as you unravel them. If those clones are blocking one of the paths, you can't slide them. What you have to do, then, is find a way to wrap them into a single entity, while also ensuring they all land in a jump formation. It's definitely not going to click with everyone, but at least the battles are pretty snappy in all other respects. Selecting an attack comes down to picking a weapon and then performing the right action commands, quick and easy. Max HP hearts increase Mario's overall attack power too, meaning you can skip fights with weak enemies altogether, a touch I really hope more RPGs adopt. While I admit the enemies don't deal enough damage to be threatening, they all have unique attacks that are fun to learn. Which attack a group of enemies decide to do depends on how many enemies are left standing. They can all group up to raise their attack power, they can form a pyramid, they can throw each other. Adds a lot of personality to the Folded Soldier's tendencies, since each species has a different attack. I guess the question is, without experience points, how does the game extrinsically incentivize you to battle? Quite simply, the entire economy is built around coins. Coins are used to buy items, weapons, and treasures, sure, but they're also used to buy more traditional upgrades in the form of accessories. It is admittedly an unorthodox method of progression for an RPG, nonetheless it offers something very similar. Having everything in the game depend on coins, even sometimes needing to spend them on key items, is a fantastic incentive to not only participate in battles, but to get better at solving the puzzles in them for the bonus coins. Amassing a wealth of coins will allow you to afford more treasures, weapons, and accessories. By the time I reached Shangri Spa and was greeted with legendary weapons at the shop, I felt like all of the battles I had willingly participated in throughout the game were finally paying off. I bought 5 legendary hammers and boots as a little reward for persevering through some particularly tough battles. Due to how these battles are structured though, it didn't feel like a particularly overpowered reward. Having a bunch of legendary weapons did mean I could more easily take out enemies in a single attack, but that can still only happen so effectively provided I'm able to solve the puzzles they set up for me, which in the late game are noticeably more complicated. This is also why it's fun to stumble across powerful weapons by exploring the overworld. It doesn't quite break the game since the combat isn't centered around raw damage. Even using legendary weapons in the boss fights doesn't make a noticeable difference as they all have unique weaknesses to exploit anyway. All of this topped with a fun, occasionally heartfelt story. On its surface, it's easy to criticize that Peach has once again been kidnapped. But then I guess even the best Paper Mario games started with a kidnapped Peach. What starts as a fairly standard "the folded soldiers are taking over" plot unravels into something much more intimate. You meet a cast of lovable dorks along the way, some even becoming temporary party members. They don't offer a lot in the battles, as this game isn't really built for them to be able to do anything, but having the opportunity to bond with partner characters in these areas is a welcome change of pace. Professor Toad is a bit generic, but I do love the chemistry between him and Olivia, especially the brief conversations you get riding around the desert. Kamek and Bowser Jr. are probably half the reason Shangri Spa is such a highlight of the game. Kamek is characterized as this nanny figure taking after the childish Bowser Jr., and their dynamic is wonderful. Kamek has serious self-confidence issues. No one ever listens to what he has to say. They even make that into a gag in the jungle, where Kamek just so happens to be correct in all 3 forks in the road. They're such a joy to explore with, and adding Bowser to that party in the endgame was the cherry on top. I was so delighted to see that he wasn't the secret final boss or something. Love seeing Bowser trust in his children. He has some extremely powerful, wholesome dad energy in this one. Origami King fully commits to King Ollie as the main antagonist, which lends far more weight to Olivia as a character. I'm gonna need you to just trust me on this next sentence. Origami King has a fairly powerful, though understated, thematic through line. Life is ultimately what you make of it, no matter its length. We learn this chiefly through Bobby, the first partner character. Not only does he have amnesia, he's missing his iconic Bob-omb fuse. In a quest to get his memories back, he travels with Mario and Olivia for a very brief pocket of game time. You explore the Autumn Mountains, ride the river rapids, geek out in an amusement park, and watch the fireworks together. Almost as soon as Bobby regains his memories, King Ollie throws a boulder onto Olivia, and time is of the essence. After traveling to the abandoned cruise liner, the Princess Peach, Bobby retrieves his lost fuse and sacrifices himself to blow up the boulder and save Olivia. Before that, though, he tells Mario a bit more about his past. Bob-ombs, he says, have a very short lifespan. The moment they explode, they're gone. And yet, he doesn't lament his short life. He celebrates the time he had with Mario and Olivia. Though it may have only been a day or so at most, the fun he had with Mario and Olivia was real. He cherished that. He couldn't continue to live knowing that he didn't do everything he could to save Olivia. And so, he blows up the boulder. Olivia and Mario mourn his death, and after you cheer her up, you continue your fun adventure with Bobby in your memory. After all, he would want your life to be filled with just as much joy as his own life. King Ollie stands in stark contrast to this idea. His life is filled with hatred at a perceived slight by his creator. In his eyes, he was scribbled over carelessly, and this hatred is what fuels Ollie to the bitter end. Obviously, this is an extremely simple motivation, but hey, it's a story with somewhat comedic, lighthearted undertones. It works in that context. Olivia, though she was born through Ollie recently, decided to do just as Bobby had done, to end her own life by recalling all of Ollie's hateful creations. What Ollie did was wrong. He tried to eliminate each and every Toad because of his own hatred for them. What the game is saying, then, is that life is unpredictable. It can be long, short, fun, or sad. But life is ultimately what you make of it. It can be fun even if it's short. Your life is as fulfilling as you want it to be. And holding on to grudges, letting your hatred burn, isn't truly living. What Ollie did with his short life was something he ultimately regretted before it was ripped away from him. Ironically, the happy life his Toad craftsman wished for him was taken away from him by himself. Through this, Paper Mario: The Origami King, of all games, is about living the most fun life you can. A fittingly light, happy message for a Mario game. I really don't think I'm reading too much into that. There's enough subtext there for me to reach that reading, even if I do think it's not an overt focus of the narrative. Nevertheless, simple as it was a message that lifted me up. It was a through line that threaded together a plot that could otherwise have been a series of funny jokes and nothing else. I don't mean for you to get the impression that this is some masterpiece, nor do I even think it can live up to the tall legacy of its predecessors. Those early Paper Mario games were as formative to my childhood years as Zelda and Pokemon. I can't say Origami King is necessarily like that, but what I can say is that it left me about as happy as I remember being when I played those earlier games for the first time. Every new area in Origami King put a huge smile on my face, pouring over every line of dialogue, every secret area, every gorgeous visual was pure, compressed fun. It might not be what everyone wanted or expected. I have a list of notable problems with it that I didn't talk about here, since this is about how I learned to love it. Despite them, though, it's given me a lot of confidence in the series' direction. It's made me want to revisit Color Splash to see if I've passed it up unfairly. It's taught me, once again, not to judge a book by its cover. It's even gotten me to maybe consider standing on the edge of a possibility that I revisit Sticker Star one day when I'm really drunk. Most of all, it's been a ray of light in a dark, dark moment in my life. surrounded by a world breaking apart at the seams, unable to leave my home for more than a routine trip to the grocery store, separated from my loved ones, trapped in a house with my roommates enough to drive me insane, Paper Mario was once again there to lift me back up, dust me off, and fold that frown upside down.